Please, don't send me away out.
All right, you can stay with me.
The wind moved slowly across the wide prairie, brushing over the tall, dry grass like waves in a silent ocean. Far beyond the dusty road, standing alone under an endless sky, was an old wooden ranch house. Its paint had faded years ago, and the porch creaked whenever the wind pushed against it. This was where Daniel Harper lived. Daniel was a man who had learned how to live with silence. His ranch sat miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by open land, grazing cattle, and the distant shapes of mountains that looked blue in the evening light. Every morning before sunrise, Daniel woke up to the same sound, the low breathing of his old horse, Rusty, in the barn. The routine never changed. He would pull on his worn leather boots, step outside into the cold prairie air, and watch the sky slowly turn from black to pale gold. For Daniel, mornings were the easiest part of the day. It was the evenings that were hardest, because evenings reminded him of the past. Years ago, this ranch had not been silent. There had been laughter, warm lights glowing through the windows, and the smell of food drifting from the kitchen. But time had taken those things away, one by one. Now the only sounds were wind, hooves, and the occasional cry of a distant coyote. Daniel didn't complain. Ranch life had taught him long ago that loneliness could become a kind of companion if you let it. On most days, he spent hours riding across the fields, checking fences, guiding cattle, and fixing whatever the harsh prairie weather had broken overnight. His hands were rough and strong from years of work, and his face carried the quiet lines of someone who had lived more memories than he spoke about. People in town described him as a quiet man, but the truth was simpler. Daniel had simply stopped expecting anyone to stay. Late one afternoon, dark clouds gathered slowly over the prairie. A cold wind rolled across the land, carrying the smell of rain. Daniel stood near the barn gate, watching the sky with the calm patience of someone who had spent his entire life reading the weather. Storms were common here, but something about this evening felt different. Rusty shifted uneasily in the stable. The wind began to whistle through the wooden fences. Dust lifted from the road and swirled through the empty land. Daniel turned toward the house, ready to head inside before the rain began. Then he saw something strange. Far down the lonely dirt road that led to the ranch, a figure was walking. At first, Daniel thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. No one walked this road. The nearest bus stop was miles away, but the figure kept moving closer, slowly, unsteadily, and as the wind carried a faint sound across the prairie, Daniel realized something even more unusual. The figure wasn't just a traveler. It was a woman. By the time the woman reached the gate of the ranch, the storm had begun. Cold rain fell across the prairie, soaking the dry earth and turning the dusty road into dark mud. Lightning flickered behind the distant hills, briefly lighting the wide, empty land. Daniel stepped forward slowly. The woman looked exhausted. Her clothes were dusty and wrinkled, her hair damp from the rain, and her small suitcase looked far too light for someone traveling such a long distance. She hesitated when she saw him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind pushed against the gate, making it creak loudly. Finally, the woman gathered the courage to speak. Are you Mr. Daniel Harper?" Her voice was soft but shaky. Daniel frowned slightly. It had been years since someone had come to the ranch asking for him by name. "Yes," he said cautiously. "Who are you?" The woman swallowed, gripping the handle of her suitcase. My name is Clara Whitmore." Daniel had never heard the name before, but something in her eyes told him she hadn't walked all this way by accident. The rain grew heavier. Clara looked up at the dark sky, then back at Daniel. For a moment, it seemed like she was struggling to find the right words. Finally, she said something that made Daniel's heart pause. I came here because of the letter." Daniel blinked. "The letter?" he repeated. Clara slowly reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The edges were worn, as if it had been opened many times during a long journey. She handed it to him. Daniel unfolded it carefully. As soon as his eyes saw the handwriting, a strange chill ran through him, because he recognized it. The letter had been written months ago, during one of the loneliest nights Daniel had ever known. It was a letter he had sent to a mail-order bride service, something he had almost forgotten about. At the time, the silence of the ranch had felt unbearable. The idea had seemed foolish even while he wrote it. A lonely rancher hoping someone, somewhere, might be willing to start a life out here. But no one had ever replied. At least, he thought no one had. Daniel slowly looked back up at Clara. "You came because of this?" Clara nodded quietly, but there was something deeply uncertain in her expression. And then, almost in a whisper, she said the words that would soon change everything. "Please, just let me stay tonight." The rain had grown heavier outside. Lightning flashed across the prairie sky, lighting up the wide, empty land for a brief moment before darkness swallowed everything again. Daniel stepped aside and opened the door. "Come in. He shouldn't be standing out there in the storm." Clara slowly stepped inside the ranch house. Her shoes left small, muddy marks on the wooden floor as the warmth of the room wrapped around her. The soft glow of the oil lamp lit the quiet space, but it still felt like a house that had been silent for many years. Daniel added more wood to the stove. The fire crackled softly, spreading warmth through the room. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "You came a long way," he said quietly. "Why here?" Clara clasped her hands together, her fingers trembling slightly. "Because I didn't have anywhere else to go." Daniel said nothing. He simply listened. After a moment, Clara took a slow breath and began telling her story. "My family used to live in the city," she said softly. "My father owned a small business. We weren't rich, but we had enough to live a good life." Her eyes drifted toward the window as rain tapped against the glass. "But then, everything changed." Her voice trembled. "My father became sick, very sick. The business failed, and soon the debts started piling up. After he passed away, we lost everything." Daniel's expression hardened slightly. He knew the look of loss when he heard it. Clara continued. "The bank took our house. The friends we thought we had slowly disappeared. And suddenly, I was alone." She paused for a moment. "I tried to find work, any work, but every place said the same thing. We'll call you later." Her lips curled into a faint, sad smile. But no one ever called. She slowly looked back at Daniel. "Then, one day, I saw your letter." Daniel shifted slightly in his chair. Clara reached into her coat pocket again and unfolded the same worn letter. "You wrote that life here was quiet. You wrote that the land was wide and lonely, but honest." Daniel lowered his eyes. "And you said something else," Clara added gently. "You said maybe two lonely people could build a home together." The room fell silent again. Finally, Clara spoke in a quiet voice. I didn't know if coming here was the right decision. She looked at him with tired eyes. But it felt like my last chance. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. And if you send me away, I truly have nowhere left to go. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The storm had passed, but inside his mind, another storm had begun. He stood near the window, staring out at the dark prairie. This land, this house, this silence, it had been his world for years. A long time ago, when his wife had died from illness, Daniel made a quiet promise to himself. He would never allow himself to depend on someone again, because the closer someone gets, the deeper the pain when they leave. But now things were different. On the kitchen table sat Clara's small suitcase. It looked fragile, almost out of place in the rough ranch house. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He knew the simplest solution. In the morning, he could take Clara to the nearest town. Maybe she would find work there. Maybe she could start again somewhere else. It would be the practical choice, the safe choice, but perhaps also the cruelest one. Morning slowly arrived. Golden light spread across the prairie, painting the endless grass fields with soft color. Daniel stepped outside, breathing in the cool morning air. A moment later, the door behind him opened. Clara stepped onto the porch. Her face looked anxious. I'm ready if you want to take me to town, she said quietly. She tried to smile, but fear was visible in her eyes. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Life had brought him to a place where neither choice felt easy. He could protect his quiet, lonely life, or he could become someone else's hope. Clara lowered her eyes. Then softly she whispered, "Please, don't send me away." The morning sun slowly rose over the prairie. After the night's rain, the air smelled fresh and clean. The land stretched endlessly under the wide sky, glowing in soft golden light. Daniel stood silently for a moment. Then he made the decision that would change both of their lives. Clara? She looked up immediately. Hope and fear filled her eyes at the same time. Daniel spoke slowly. This life out here isn't easy. Winters are harsh, work is hard, and sometimes the days feel very long. Clara listened carefully. Then Daniel continued, "But if you truly want to stay here," he paused, "then you can stay." Clara's heart skipped. Really? For the first time in many years, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "Yes." Then he added, "But there's one condition." Clara's heart skipped. What condition? Daniel looked out across the wide fields of his ranch. "If you stay, this won't just be my home anymore." He turned back to her. "It will be our home." For a moment, Clara couldn't speak. Tears slowly filled her eyes. But this time, they were not tears of fear. They were tears of hope. "I promise," she said softly, "I'll do everything I can to make this house feel alive again." Daniel nodded. Far across the prairie, the sun rose higher into the sky, and for the first time in many years, the lonely ranch was no longer lonely. A new story had just begun.